Hello and welcome to a past paper walkthrough of this June 2018 Creative iMedia exam, which is a Cambridge National qualification set by the exam board OCR. I chose this particular exam from June 2018 because more recent exams are currently locked on the exam board's website at the time I record this, or have been covered by somebody else on YouTube at this point. So I want it to be a little bit different, but this is a fairly typical exam, so I think it's definitely still worth covering. Before I begin, I should just plug the fact that on my YouTube channel I've got a playlist which covers all of the content required for this particular exam with a unit code R081. So this is a theoretical exam with practical aspects as well. I think some people expect they can just walk in and just wing it. Actually, we have got a lot of content you need to learn as reflected in this playlist. So make sure you are revising for this exam properly, like any other exam, because you do need to know specific details, as we'll see as we go through. So this will be linked in the description. Also, I should say before we begin, I'd recommend you try this exam yourself, because otherwise just knowing the answers is not necessarily that helpful. You're lucky that you've got loads and loads of past papers you can choose from at this point, because this course has been around for a while. But if you are going to mark it properly, you've got to make sure you find the grade boundaries for this particular exam series, because they do change a little bit year on year, not by loads but a little bit. So find the Creative iMedia section. To find this document, you've got to Google Google Cambridge National grade boundaries for June 2018, and you'll find this PDF, and you can see under pre-production skills what mark you need to get in order to get certain grades. You can see for distinction start at level 2 you can only drop 8 marks in this exam, so you haven't got too much room to drop marks if you're aiming for the top grades. So anyway, I'd recommend you do this and mark it properly using those grade boundaries, but that's just for context for this. The first page of this exam paper is not particularly insightful, other than it takes an hour and 15 minutes and it's worth 60 marks. So generally the advice is you spend about a minute per mark, which is true for this paper too. This is a rough guide so you don't run out of time, but clearly here, if you do a minute a mark for 60 marks, you've only got an hour being used, and you've got that 15 minutes spare at the end to check, or also maybe to spend more time on the last question or the longer mark questions as well. So the only other detail I want to point out specifically is making sure you use black ink. That's important. You can't use lovely colourful pens, unfortunately, because it will be scanned in for the examiner, but also using pencil for the graphs and diagrams only. For the questions you are actually making a diagram, use pencil, and also make sure you bring in a rubber into the exam, just so you can change your work and amend it as you go. You can't do that if you don't have one, or if you use ink for those practical questions. Okay, so let's begin with our first question in section A. We're given some context here. So Words from the Planet is a new conservation campaign with the purpose of increasing the awareness of environmental issues that are faced by our planet. The campaign is targeted at a wide target audience between the ages of 12 and 50. Words from the Planet will use a variety of media to raise awareness of the issues faced. So we've been asked to create a number of pre-production documents to take to the first campaign meeting. We need to first of all identify 3 items other than annotations, which could be included on a visualization diagram for a flyer to publicize this campaign. So 3 items, 3 marks to begin. So we're looking for the content of a visualization diagram here. So visualization diagram is a nice way of just mocking up, like doing a mock-up of the actual product here, which is a flyer. So you might just sketch out the different aspects of the flyer. So for example, you might include maybe the logo in maybe a rough form, but for this campaign, we might include the color scheme, or colors certainly, and we might include some images of maybe, I don't know, a rainforest here. It seems to fit in with this campaign. So some images which are related to this campaign. These are quite general, don't need to be particularly tied to this scenario, but we could also say things like, text is quite generic because annotations are text, but we can include like content about the campaign, maybe about campaign. We could also include like the title and a font, the fonts we're going to use, etc., etc. So that's roughly what we're going for the first part. So for part B, explain the purpose of a digital mood board for the Words of the Planet campaign. So because it's a 2-mark question, we want to make 2 points here, and because we are explaining it, we need to make sure those points are linked and also linked to the campaign. So the main purpose of a mood board is to generate ideas. So we could say to generate ideas, and that would get us 1 mark, it's 1 point. But we can't leave it there, that's only 1 mark. We need to actually link it to this campaign. So we could say generate ideas about What can we say exactly about how awareness could be raised, about how so it is important to always link your points to a scenario where you can, and that would get us our second mark, so that link to actually this particular scenario. So what I mean by this, maybe this mood board has got images from past campaigns by other charities, maybe it's got some colour schemes, maybe it's got, if it's a digital mood board, maybe some videos which are embedded, which are from past adverts, for example. We could also say it can be used also to communicate to communicate ideas to maybe so usually the client, but maybe like people who are donating to this campaign, people who are generally backing this charity, right? So not just creating ideas for the campaign itself, but also maybe communicating to people who are also involved. Okay, right, so for question 2, several short 30-second films will be made to explain each of the environmental issues facing the planet. A storyboard will be created for each of these films. Explain one reason why this is the most suitable document for planning these films. Okay, so the idea of using a storyboard as opposed to a visualization diagram is really a storyboard is dealing with multiple scenes or multiple sections of the film, whereas a visualization diagram is just one static image planning, which isn't really suitable for a film, right? So the idea being we can, or maybe not we, but we can show multiple scenes for each film and show the order that they are meant to go in. Okay, so again 2 marks, we're making 2 points here. We are only saying one reason, that's quite important. Don't say 2 reasons. A second reason could be maybe we want to plan out some times, making sure it all fits in 30 seconds. We might also want to, in a storyboard, start considering things like camera angles and other technical details like lighting, but we can't talk about more than one reason in our answer because that's not what the exam question says. So we have 2 points here, right? We can show multiple scenes for each film and show the order. That is, it's a linked point, right? They seem 2 different points, but actually they are linked. So that'd be fine for 2 marks. For part B, we're given 3 usual common aspects of a storyboard, and we need to explain how the following aspects help the production team, so the people actually in production who are going to be making this film or series of films. So first of all, camera angles. These refer to how exactly the camera is going to be placed. Is it going to be placed so that you can see over the shoulder of one of the actors? Is it going to be placed so we get a nice aerial shot? Is it going to be a low angle that's shooting upwards towards people? So this is what would be specified in your storyboard. Well, the production team are able to know where to place the camera so that the desired shot can be taken. If you weren't specifying the camera angle in your storyboard, how would the cameraman or woman know where to actually place it? And for our second part of this question, scene numbers, how are the scene numbers going to help people on production? Well, for example, the editor will know the order of the scenes edited in the correct sequence, we could say. Without scene numbers, it might be a slight guessing game for the editor or the director too. So we're just giving sort of real life situations for each of these points. And finally, camera movements. So for example, is it a panning camera? Is it a tilting camera? What exactly is the camera doing? Well, this is quite important so that the crew can position equipment. Not only for the actual movements, it might be using a track if it's if you're like a tracking shot, but also equipment, but also not to get in the way of the camera moving. E.g. lighting, we could say. So we might have some lighting set up. It's important this lighting is not then in the way of your camera, so that the camera is not obstructed, we could say. So we can say a few more things about each of these points, but these are just examples. Hopefully you can see how I'm really thinking, right, I want to get 2 marks per answer. It's 6 marks total. So if we're making 3 points, we want 2 marks each to get our full 6 marks. You're kind of stating a point to know where to place the camera. when you're explaining why, so that the desired shot can be taken, right? So 2 points for it. Same with the editor and the order for scenes. So what's the consequence? That's what we're saying. And finally, the composition equipment, so not to obstruct the camera. So we're trying to make 2 points so we can get our full marks. Right, for our third question, the films will be shown on various websites as well as on screens in amusement parks. Explain how the wide age range of the words from a planet target audience would affect the content of the films, for 3 marks again. Right, so this wide age range is going way back to the first page of our exam paper, which says it's focused between the ages of 12 and 50. So it is indeed quite a big target audience, which will definitely affect our content. So first of all, if it's at people who are 12, clearly the content can't be too, how can we phrase this, be too, let's just say upsetting, or also graphic as well, right? If you're showing particularly harrowing climate change footage, that might be quite upsetting for younger audiences. So not, we could explain this point, so not to almost put off, or I guess we could say cause upset. We've said upset already, but cause offence to younger viewers. So younger, maybe we should be more specific here, to viewers, to children maybe, because that's in our range. Obviously younger is could be young adults too, we probably would not be massively offended. So we could say therefore suitable audio and video or images. In fact, it's on screens, so actually, yeah, we could say video should be chosen. Conversely, we could say, you've got to make sure this content is not too childish, because clearly people who are 50 are not going to be as engaged if it's aimed at people who are 13 only. So it's kind of a balance between the two, but that should get us our 3 marks, because we're being specific in our third point, but we've also said it can't be too upsetting. Why? Because it will cause offence to children. And what exactly needs to get changed? Well, it could be the audio and video, which could needs to be more suitable. We could give examples, right? We could say, e.g., no swearing, if you want to be certain of getting that 3rd mark. And for part B, we need to identify 2 aspects other than age of target audiences that could be considered when planning these films. So out of our list, we've got beyond age, gender, income, ethnicity, accessibility, and location, I believe. So we could say any 2 of those. Let's just say, why don't we say gender and income as 2 other factors. But I've given you the list of ones we could mention. Question 4 looks to be on legal issues. So we're told first of all the name of words from the planet will be trademarked with a TM symbol. Explain what the trademark TM symbol means when it is used with the campaign's name for 2 marks. So a trademark is really registering a name as belonging to a particular organisation. That's really the essence of a trademark. It's different to copyright, make sure you don't get copyright mixed up. Copyright is just applied automatically when you make some creative product, but trademark is about a particular name or a particular brand being associated with one company or one organisation in particular. So it means that name is so maybe beyond associated is owned by the campaign, and so anyone using it, or anyone else using it I should say, needs to get their permission. So they're allowed to then license it to somebody else, let someone else use it if they see fit, but they've got legal responsibility for that name, and so no one else should be using it unless they get permission, is the idea. And our second half of this question, the words from the Planet campaign will use images taken from space, showing the world's oceans. The copyright of these images is held by the space organisations who took the images. So we need to describe what steps must be taken so that these images can be used for, again, 2 marks. So first of all, because these space organisations own the copyright because they took the images, that's automatically their right, that they own it. We must first of all contact the organisations to ask their permission to use the photos. And that would probably get us 2 marks because we've made 2 points there, right? Contact first of all, then what you're actually contacting about. But also we could say it's important to acknowledge them as the authors of the photos, as in, you'll say, you'll show the C symbol and copyright NASA, say for example, when you are showing the photos, but assuming you've got permission first of all. Right, section B begins with us given loads of different images here for different topics, and some of them are quite creepy. And we need to choose 6 images from this previous page to create a mood board for this campaign. You don't need to draw the images, really important, don't spend ages copying the image, that's pointless. You must show which images you've chosen and where you would position them on the mood board, and marks are going to be awarded for fitness of purpose, and also importantly annotations to justify our choices. That means explain why we chose the images we did. So it's got to go within this box, and it's worth 9 marks. Right, so bear in mind this is an environmental campaign. Which images might be particularly appropriate? Well, it's really down to you. So for the images I choose here, it's not really, you might choose different ones, that may be perfectly fine as long as you justify it. I quite like immediately image 2, the idea of having a globe in your hand. It suggests we are in control of a situation, and we could justify it like that. So why don't you put that down straight away, globe in hand. Let's put maybe right in the middle of our mood board. The actual layout, a mood board is just for ideas, so it doesn't matter so much as long as they're not crowded in the corner. This was number 2, so we could write 2, we could do it as a little box, and we could do 2 globe in hand. And our annotation could be, we could say it shows the message that we are in control of the environment. So it's really a metaphor for this whole charity. What else could we include? What else is suitable? Maybe because it's a mood board, we have some fonts here. So the actual fonts, the actual image is not relevant for this campaign. Remember, we're not doing like a leaflet here, this is just a mood board. So having fonts is really useful. We could put the fonts maybe right at the start, so we can start to think about what fonts are most appropriate. So let's put right in the corner. What number is it? I keep forgetting. 10 fonts. So we can start to, annotation could be to start to think about what fonts fit with their images. Might be why we are including it. Some fonts might stick out, some fonts might be a little bit too congested and might not really fit with this whole theme. That's the whole idea of a mood board. What else is appropriate for this? Maybe why don't we go for image 19, this man with hands on face, because he looks quite anguished, which you could be sort of experimenting with how exactly you want to get this across. You might be thinking, well, maybe that is a little bit too mature for, say, children who is going to be in our target audience, but still you can start to experiment with it. So let's put it maybe over here. So it's 19 man, and we could justify it by saying it is a darker image, and by that I mean more mature, so we can see how it fits in the scene, or the theme, sorry. The idea being we can start to experiment with different images, maybe ones which are not necessarily ideal for our target audience, but we can start to see if that gives the right message. And we've got a few more, so I'll just skip ahead a little bit here, so I'm not just talking about it. I've got 3 more to choose. So for example, 18, about Earth Day, so it's more about a celebration, so and more positive than, say, that man with his hands on his face. More positive, and it could be used as an inspiration for this campaign. As far as I know, Earth Day is a previous campaign, and often you'll include images or media from competitor campaigns in a sense, so you get more ideas. And also we could include the image of cars, because we could say reducing car use could be a focus of their campaign. Because of the CO2 petrol and diesel cars produce. And finally, why don't we include smoke, so 9 smoke as our final one. Put it in the corner. Maybe because we can demonstrate how climate change can be produced. Maybe again that's a focus of your campaign linked to cars. Maybe it's smoke coming out of a factory, it looks like up here, but it could also be linked to smoke coming out of an engine, right? So look, I know this is maybe not the most perfect mood board ever. I think probably I'd give more detail to my annotations, to be quite honest, but I think really it's important to choose images which are suitable, which aren't just random images, and images which are spread out. You are spreading things out. Try and include other media if you can, like fonts, if it gives you that option. So if we're not just doing fully picture-based mood board, but also make sure you're annotating it and adding some detail linked to this scenario in particular. Okay, moving on. So we're now given a script to look at. I won't read it because let's see what we need to do. Question 6. Create a mind map from this script. Show me the various aspects that need to be considered when planning the filming of one of the short films. And marks are being awarded for layout and fitness for purpose for 7 marks. So really, we're not converting the script into a mind map, because what's the point? But what we are going to do is imagine we were given this script and we need to now plan how we're going to film it. We need to do a mind map of different things to consider. So before we even look at the script in detail, as our first node, our central node, let's call it filming or production or whatever, just a central idea we can branch off at. I'll do this as a kind of cloud, which doesn't matter how you do it exactly, but that's okay. So what things can we consider which are relevant for this example in particular? So we start off being at the edge of forest, a foot of mountain. EXT means exterior, meaning we're outside. Camera flying in, and we've got, looks like we are in Alaska, or at least that's what we're saying we are. We may actually be somewhere else. It doesn't say we are in Alaska specifically. Home of a brown bear and the last untamed wilderness. And the bear is sort of apparently going to be walking around on the streets and climbing through a house window. Very optimistic, trying to get a bear to go through a window on command, but there we go. So what can we consider? First of all, the first thing that screams out to me is health and safety. It's always important to mention. So let's have an idea branching out here. Let's call it health and safety. So first of all, it sounds like we are in, let's do this as a normal circle actually. It sounds like we are in a remote location, and so there is a risk obviously of people getting injured, maybe falling over. So we could say, have we got a first aid kit? Also the issue being, being around brown bears is a little bit risky. I would not want to be too close to a brown bear. So health and safety, I could say, considering being around wild animals. Is there a tamer nearby? Has someone got bear spray around? Also, did it mention a river? So I don't know how close the crew would get to the river, but we can make sure we've got, say, a buoyancy aid, and so on. So we're just kind of writing things down which we think are relevant. I'm not saying these are the most important things to consider, but there are some relevant ones to this scenario. Also, we're going to consider maybe actually getting to this location. So clearly we're not in, well, I was going to say not in the UK. It doesn't sound like we are in the UK. So we've got travel somewhere else. So making sure we've got tickets. Making sure, I've done no arrows before, so I should be more consistent and just do straight lines all the way. Make sure you are consistent. We also want to make sure we can take all of our equipment. Are we going to rent for equipment, or are we going to buy it, or what are we going to do? We're going to take it to this place. Could also consider the cast and crew. They could be separate bubbles here actually, but I don't know if it matters too much because we've only got one human in our actual video just for presenter, it looks like. So we need to cast for presenter. Who is it going to be? We need to make sure we've got camera operators and so on. We could add more to this one, of course. And let's just have maybe one or two more. So equipment, what camera are we going to take? Are we going to rent it, as I said? So like camera. Also lighting. Do we need lighting even if we're outside? Probably not, but we could still think about it. And what else could we say? What about contingency? So contingency being when things go a little bit wrong. If you are trying to get a bear to go through a window, I think it's probably a good idea to have a second ending in case it doesn't work. So having a backup plan for animals, just in case. Also, maybe we have weather being considered. I mean, probably if I was doing this for real, I'd be writing out these a little bit more. But I think that's enough for us to show we have understood or have tried to understand the scenario, and we are linking our points directly to it. And we've got quite a few ideas, and we're showing it as subnodes, and then further points branching off those subnodes as well. So it should be enough for 7 marks. But like I said, you might want to write these out a little bit more if you were actually doing it. Okay, moving on. So for 7A, we still need to use our script in figure 2, and we need to identify the following: location, character, stage direction. First of all, location. So it says we are in Alaska, so America, but actually we don't know for sure we are definitely in Alaska because it doesn't say at the top where we are. It could be in, Canada, or it could be in Wales, for all we know. But also we are at edge of forest, at foot of mountain, so we could say either of those things. Let's just say edge of forest for now. We could probably also edge of forest. We'll probably also say like streets or at a window, where the bear is. Character. So our main character is our presenter. You probably could say bear as well, but I think presenter is a slightly safer option. And finally, what stage direction have we got? So non-dialogue here, and non-location, usually in brackets. So walk to camera is 1, walking circle is 1, not so much voiceover. So let's say walking circle, why not? That's a stage direction to the presenter. You can't really do a stage direction for a bear, of course, because they're wild, but you can for a presenter. And now we are told, as the script is being created, it's edited by different members of a pre-production team, and we must state one way that the script can be named to keep track of its different edits. So the common way this is done is just by having, script version 1 appended to it, or version 2 or 3 or 4 or so on. So we could just say add the version number to the file name. We could also add the person's name instead of the version number. That would also work, but file number is okay. Okay, question 8. We have a series of digital graphics being created to promote the campaign. We must identify the most suitable file format for each of the graphics listed, explaining why it is the most suitable file format. So first of all, for a printed poster. So first of all, maybe we should say for graphics, what kind of formats are we thinking about? So we can think of maybe a JPEG, thinking of maybe a PNG, maybe we are thinking of even maybe a PDF, which is more for documents, but we can have pictures. Maybe we're thinking of a BMP and maybe an SVG as well. There are other ones you may have learned, but I think these are some key ones we can start to think about. So if it is a printed poster, we want it to be a very high quality image because we're just printing it out. Maybe we're printing it on or via a professional printer. You want it to look really good if it's a nice photo, maybe. It's promoting the campaign after all. So out of the ones here, we're looking for one which isn't compressed, because compressing the file will usually reduce the quality. Well, I say, actually no, I'll correct myself. If we are doing lossy compression, we are going to reduce quality. Lossless compression is okay because quality is the same quality, but it doesn't reduce it it doesn't reduce the file size by a lot, but less good. So less good in terms of reductions. So essentially here we're looking for the most suitable. And so really we're looking for one which is uncompressed, because I just think, why mess with it at all? So the one which is uncompressed is BMP. So we could say file format, we're going to do a .bmp. Justification being that it is uncompressed. So the graphic is left at its original quality. How many marks we got? We need probably one more point in order to look as good as possible for the promotion, to make sure to show we can understand it, possible for the promotion campaign. Okay, right, so that's, I think, fine for a printed poster. What about for a web graphic? Well, maybe not so much in this case, because the issue being, if it's uncompressed, you are leaving it in its original format, which may be a massive, massive file because it was taken by a professional camera, for example. So actually, having it on the web, having maybe this image embedded uncompressed on your website, will take a long time to download. And so we want a format which does fairly heavy compression, which is really what lossy is there for. So lossy will reduce the quality a little bit, but not terribly. It'll just reduce the file size by a decent amount. So JPEG is a good lossy compression method. So we could say .jpg. Justification, in order to reduce upload and download times, we want to compress it. And also we could say it's not going to affect quality too much. It will affect it maybe to an extent, but usually it's pretty good JPEG. It doesn't go terrible without affecting quality too much. So we want to make sure we're writing enough to be able to get our 3 marks for each of these 2 scenarios. Okay, moving on to the final question in the paper, the infamous evaluation question, which is 12 marks in this case. That's pretty typical for this exam. So we are basing this all on the following document, a draft storyboard for a section of one of the 30-second films, and the storyboard will be given to the camera crew who will create the film. Okay, so first of all, we're going to have to, in a second, discuss the suitability of the content for the camera crew, so strengths, weaknesses, and also suggest areas of improvement. I mean, to make sure we are talking enough to get our 12 marks. So let's start to think about it here. Clouds, camera flies through them. Okay. Mountains, camera flies past mountains along a line of river. Under the sea. Okay. And we've got some fish here. Rainforest, camera rises from ground up over trees. So we've got camera movement, which is quite good here. So we've got quite a lot of camera movement I'm noticing. Not so much in our third board. We've got movement in the first 2, which is useful for a camera crew, of course. We've got a detail about the camera shot type, so a wide shot of tree and close in on tree falling, again a camera shot, and more camera movement for this beach, and again more camera details. So there's a lot of camera details which is useful for a camera crew, but otherwise not a lot of details otherwise. So before we start writing here, it's always good to do a little plan for a question like this. We could do just to one side pros and cons, just so we have a few points already we're starting to think about. So I do like the fact we have lots of camera details, so movement and shot type, which is good. What else do I like about it? So I think the sketches are quite clear what is being, the key aspects of each frame, each shot. So clear sketches. It's quite obvious we've got trees here, quite obvious we've got people, which is not always the case. I think we have some location info, but not quite enough, right? We might want to have more details to be more specific about where exactly we need to be. It says rainforest, but there are rainforests in lots of different places. Where exactly, what mountains is it? Is it the same country as our rainforest? Is it a different country? We're not quite told. Why are we talking about under the sea when it's in the previous shot is along the line of the river? Or I say previous shot, actually, it's not totally clear the order is a con, right? So what is the order exactly? Usually it'll be horizontal like that, but we're not really clear. It could say, scene 1, scene 2, scene 3 and so on. It's not incredibly clear. We also don't know details about how exactly these scenes change, right? We don't know the transitions. So what are the transitions? Does the camera crew have to decide it? Is the editor going to decide it? I mean, to be fair, I guess the camera crew are not really editing it necessarily, but still I feel like they need to know exactly how it's going to transition. Is it meant to be a smooth one? Is it meant to be a complete jump? There are no colours specified at all. Do the colours matter? For example, do the colours of a fish matter? Do the colours of a tree matter? Is it autumn? Are they going to be more yellow than green? And does it matter what the weather is like? So we are generally a little bit low on specific details in this storyboard. It's very much left up to the camera crew, which probably they don't massively like. They would probably rather have more details, but maybe not too many details. Okay, so I think we can probably start to write this up. You're not going to be marked just based on how many points you make. You want to have an equal number of positive and negative points, and we're not coming to a conclusion. That's quite important, but it's not like you need to make 6 points of each in order to get full marks. It'll be a little bit more, it'll be marked more generally than this. So first of all, I think let's start off on a positive. Why not? So we could say the storyboard contains detail about camera movements for, is it how many do not have movements? Is it just, it's just one board for all but one scene. This could say helps for camera crew. Make sure you are talking about the camera crew, not talking about lighting riggers or the director or the editor. Know what needs to be done. But we could say, however, it's not clear what happens in the under the sea scene. Further guidance could be given for that scene. Okay, so that's a first couple of points. Could also mention, is it positive to have different shot types? That is useful information. But I mean, close-in on tree falling, there could be a separate board showing the close-in. So it does tell us we've got a wide shot, which is probably represented in this scene in the picture, but doesn't really show us the close-in, how that might look. How close-in is it? So I've said having a separate picture for the close-up may help the camera crew know what to focus on. It does say, I believe, a close-up of the boy, but I mean, you're focusing on a close-up of the tree falling, but are you focusing on the top, the bottom? Are you focusing on where it's landing? It could be a little bit more specific. Again, we're making points a little bit for the sake of it, but that's okay. That's what the essence of an exam. What else did I mention? I mentioned the location information is better than nothing. So you could say rough locations are given, and we could just say which fit the campaign purpose. We're talking more about the camera crew here, but we could just throw in that as there's no harm for the campaign purpose. But in fact, let's maybe explain this a little bit more. So the crew know to film outdoors, so not in a studio, but we could say and no detail is given on the actual specific locations. We could say this could waste money, unnecessary travel. If you're going to Brazil for your rainforest and to Switzerland for the mountain, that may be pointless if they're all intending it to be in Brazil. By the crew. In fact, I don't know why I'm doing this in black, ignore me. That's still kind of my negative points. We could say instead the country could be specified. Or the town or city or whatever it is. Maybe not city for this scenario. So I think we should maybe write a few more points here. Would probably bring us up to 12. So what else do we talk about? Maybe so let's say the sketches are quite clear, but they're not including colours. Those points go together quite well. They're nice and balanced. We're doing one negative, one positive. So you could say the sketches are clear and unambiguous. That means we can't interpret them in multiple ways. They're very clear. Unambiguous. So the content which is being filmed will not be mistaken. I'm not sure that fully makes sense, that sentence, but we can always reread it afterwards. So the content which is being filmed will not be mistaken, as in we're not going to film, a shark as opposed to a fish. Those are quite clearly fish, is what I mean by that. I think I'd probably go back and add on to it if I was doing it for real. But we could say, but no colours. No, we probably want to start that in a proper way of starting a sentence. No colours mean that details about the season. So I mentioned like the leaves, the colour of the leaves, but also that mountain, if it has got snow on it, has it not, is it winter? So we'd say, e.g. the colour of the leaves could be added either in the image or as a description. So really, in summary, first of all, you want to check this to make sure it does make sense. I won't check this, but you can do a better job than I have, making sure it's totally making sense, it's totally fluent. It's a good idea to say, as I've done, a positive point, then a negative point, which are hopefully related, and then state your improvements. So it's a really clear, logical structure. We're not doing all negative, all positive, and then improvements. You want to try and make it quite logical and flow nicely. And also make sure your spellings are all okay, and you've got punctuation, capital letters, and so on, and are using technical terms where possible, and terms related to this particular scenario where possible. So really the idea is trying to think of as many ideas relevant for this scenario and the target audience. In this case, the target audience is just a camera crew. So don't talk about the editor, don't talk about the clients necessarily. Just care about the camera crew for now. So be really careful making sure it's nice and specific to both the scenario and also the target audience. I think if you are going to go through this structure, a positive, negative, then an improvement, you can kind of almost think of it as being 3 marks. And so of course, if it's 12 marks, you want to do 4 lots of this, which I haven't here. I've done 3 lots of it. So actually, in fact, have I done? No, I have done 3 lots of it. So perhaps you'd want to add a 4th reason if you've got time. But in theory, it should be marked more generally than this and look at it as a whole. But make sure you are explaining your answers for the top mark. If you're just stating what is wrong, then that won't be enough to get you, more than maybe 7 marks.